I have some thoughts I'd like to share, and we'll see where this goes. So, Ecclesiastes 1 is one of my favorite verses or chapters of Scripture. I feel like there's a lot of instructive truth in here. So let's see what we can gain. So 1 verse 9. The thing that hath been done is that which shall be done. That which is done is that which shall be done. There is no new thing under the sun. I feel like we get in trouble when we start to think we're different and that we can't learn from the past. I say that and add this a few verses later, end of the chapter, verse 17 and 18. And I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. So why do I begin with those two things? I've given my heart to know the wisdom of the Old Testament and its connections. And what I've gained from that is an appreciation of recognizing that God is teaching us the same as he did anciently. The lessons, the patterns, everything is there. One thing that I've learned is the Old Testament calendar. What I've gained from that is a recognition that God follows these patterns, and it's kind of like his fingerprint on history. Things repeat because he's showing us that he's in charge. So I'm trying to pull something up. There we go. With that, I'm sorry, this might be long. The Hebrew calendar is instructive. Joseph Smith received the plates on a Hebrew calendar day. The first vision happened on a Hebrew calendar day. The celebration of the 200-year mark of the first vision happened on the exact same Hebrew calendar day, exactly 200 years apart. That's not an accident. Once again, I'm telling you this to say God uses these patterns to show that he's aware, he's in charge, he's guiding the past as he is the present and the future. We passed a date on the calendar that is really weighing on me. And it's called Tish'a B'Av, which is just simply the ninth day of the month of Av. Okay. The Tish'a B'Av is significant because it is a day of tremendous calamity for God's people. Study up on it, but most notably, the sin of the spies happened on Tish'a B'Av. They returned, gave their evil report. People believed the evil report. That was a huge calamity. Like, golden calf didn't keep them out of the land, but the sin of the spies kept them out of the land. So, pretty big deal. A whole generation was denied entering the promised land because of their sin. The 9th of Av was the destruction of the first temple. It was also the destruction of the second temple, among other things. Why is that significant for us as a Latter-day Saint people? Well, it was last Tuesday, 9th of Av, which was, sorry, I've kind of been geeking out about it, maybe, which was the 13th of August, 2024 for the record. Some of the most significant changes occurred to our temple ceremony. On the day the other temples were destroyed. I do not believe this is a positive thing. Just by nature of the day and by nature of what was changed. Unfortunately, as a people, we're embracing things of the world and rejecting things of God. The push for political correctness, for the wisdom of the world, I see as problematic. One of the most significant changes, and obviously this is hard to talk about, just because the sensitive nature, but I've thought a lot about it, and I feel like if it's changed or taken out, it's probably okay to talk about. Other than it doesn't bode well. Whether it's our leadership or us as a people, I think that's chicken or the egg. It's the same breed. I think we're getting what we desire, earned, good and hard. We're receiving diminished light. We're struggling. So, we talk about the veil of the temple being a symbol of Christ. The 3 additional marks that were removed from the temple veil were not there for convenience. If you count the total marks that were on the veil of the temple prior, it totaled 7. So if you think about Jesus on the cross, you had 2 here, 2 here, you had his 2 feet, so there's 6, and you had a mark on his side. That was 7 marks. That was how many marks were on the temple veil when we would approach it. This was truly a symbol of Christ, because it is truly through Christ that we have any hope of returning. For the light and knowledge, entering the presence, all those things is well established. I'm not revealing anything. But it's through Christ that we achieve those blessings. And that veil contained the proper number of marks. It was Christ. And that's been diminished. Why? Because we thought they were just there for convenience. I'm sorry, but that's just a fact of the change. And I don't see this as a positive thing. I see this as a tremendous problem. Once again, is it the leadership problem or the people problem? Chicken or the egg, man. They're one and the same. I think we were so wrapped up in doing the work and not learning from the lessons. Ordinances anciently, for the Jews, they were instructive, they were metaphor-filled, and it was up to them to learn from it. We always talk about Jesus being in everything. This is true, but there's also lessons for the individual. One of my favorites is, and I probably should have looked this up, but you can study it for yourself. But there's a specific offering that's done where they take it's the caul and the liver, or the caul above the liver and the 2 kidneys, and that's the thing that is burnt completely on the altar. Everything else is used. The kidneys and the caul and these lower bodily functions are symbolic of our bodily urges. Those are the things that we're to place on the altar and ask God's fire from heaven to come down and burn them up completely. That was an instructive metaphor. Yes, Christ is in that metaphor. Yes, it's only through him that we have hope of that fire, that cleansing fire. Yes, that's Jesus. But we also take part here. And there's a metaphor and a lesson for these people as they're repenting and as they're having this animal take their place, and as that's the thing that's being burned. God was teaching. That is no different than our temple metaphor that we have had with our endowment. There's lots to discuss. I feel like there's a couple things that I feel like are important to share. One is the metaphor, in my opinion, was never intended to be Eve separate, Adam separate. Like men, women, these are lessons for women, these are lessons for men, and they're just different. No, my belief is that the metaphor was about your physical body being your Eve and your spirit being your Adam, and its journey through the premortal creation, because everything physically was created before, so your physical body had a creation. So our physical body, our Eve, was in some form created prior in the premortal life. The days of creation used to be different than the Bible, and that's because the days of creation in the endowment, I believe, was tying us back to the premortal creation. This was a different time period. This was a different creation. This was nothing to do with the world. This was our premortal creation. That's why the days were different. He's trying to teach us. Now, our Eve and our Adam, when they were coming to this earth, they made a covenant to each other and then to God. I would suggest to you that there is 5 nails in the cross, and there is also 5 covenants made in the temple. Elder Bednar talked about them if you would like to learn specifically what they are. But the first one was if you picture the nails in the cross, you have 2 on one side, 2 on the other, and 1 nail in the feet. And when the feet were nailed, you had 1 foot on top of the other with a nail through it. So you have your Eve covenanting to Adam, your physical body covenanting to your spirit, and your spirit covenanting to God. 1 covenant. This was binding us together into our mortality. Our Eve, my physical body, promised to be obedient to my spirit. And it is, unless I get out of control. Then my body does what it wants. Now, that's a metaphor. It's a lesson. It's intended to be instructive. I think that taking that metaphor moving forward as they come into the earth, further covenants are offered. But first there's a test. And this, I feel like, is the most unfortunate thing that's been removed further back, but now it's removed to the point that the lesson's just not there. And that's really sad to me, because I see that this is something that's so important, and I believe that God was trying to arm us as Latter-day Saints very specifically with this endowment of knowledge, of power, that was intended to help protect us and guide us. And what it is the process of receiving messengers. A while back, the endowment consisted of having an earthly preacher. The earthly preacher was challenging Adam and Eve with the doctrines that were mingled with Scripture. The way that it was contained in the endowment when I went, that phrase felt really confusing, because it was like, what? Something here is being taught? It didn't make sense because the preacher was removed. but those philosophies of men being in Scripture was some other dude preaching them. Now, he was being inspired by Satan, and when the true messengers come, they're testing the true messengers with the knowledge that they have previously received. So, this is important because when a messenger comes, and if they're contradicting the covenant that you've received, or the light that you have, the knowledge you have, you know that they're not a true messenger. And I'm going to make this a little longer for clarity. I think this is important. The process of covenant and what you're under and the knowledge you have gets really confused in the way we talk about covenants and responsibility. So we talk a lot about how Abraham was commanded to break the thou shalt not kill by offering Isaac. The problem is if you really look, the covenant that he was under did not consist of shedding innocent blood. Okay, stick with me here. So the first covenant was obedience to God. That was received by Adam. Essentially, you have one umbrella covenant. Anybody that's a descendant from that covenant, you're responsible for that agreement that your ancestor made with God. Just like in Adam we have death, we also have responsibility. Okay? They go hand in hand. So that one was obedience. So when God comes to you and says something, we're under a covenant responsibility to do it. Okay? So the earth becomes wicked, becomes crazy. People are ignoring God. So God says, let's start over. And we have the covenant offered to Noah. Now, the way that I like to picture this is like if you're taking kids and you're trying to help them grow up, the chores that I'm going to give my 5-year-old are different than the chores I'm going to give my 18-year-old. Okay? So look at it as like a progressive growth. Okay, so the most basic chore, clean up your room, that's my, like pick up your toys. Okay? That's the little kid. Okay? But I'm not going to, so that's obedience. Okay? So maybe it's just listen to mom and dad. I don't know. I'm getting lost in my analogy here. But the point is I'm not going to come home and scream at my 5-year-old because he didn't take out my bathroom trash. Okay? That wasn't what I told him to do. Now, on the other hand, if I told him something very specific to do, come home and he's watching TV, I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to turn off the TV and have a consequence. Okay? But we recognize that we're not going to hold our child accountable for something that we didn't tell him to do. Even though if I came home and my 5-year-old had cleaned the entire house, taken out all the trash, I'm going to be thrilled. Okay? It doesn't mean he can't do good, but what it is what is he accountable for? What is sin to this little guy? What is the thing that dad's going to come home and turn the TV off for? So, that's conceptualizing this covenant process. We have a basic one. We're just starting out. Little responsibility, obedience. Okay? Step it up. You have Noah being offered further instruction. And the instruction is more like, okay, it's time to grow up. I'm going to give you a few more things. And depending how you read it, what's contained in the Bible is basically 4. Okay? You have worshiping God. Let's see here. Procreation. Multiply and replenish. You have kindness to animals. Or responsibility to animals where they're food, but you don't eat them alive. You treat them with respect. And then number 4 is a requirement to justice that is contained in blood. my blood is what I've worked for. It's my life. You can't just come and take what is mine. That's fundamentally unjust. So, so here we have this. So Adam, anybody after Adam, you're responsible for that. Noah, anything after Noah, you're responsible for that. So that's what Abraham was under Noah. So in the rules of Noah, why don't we shed innocent blood? Well, because it's fundamentally unjust. Okay. Now, is it always unjust to not shed blood? No, there's times that it's pretty just to shed blood if you're going to look at it very justly. So picture Abraham's perspective. His father had offered him as an offering, okay? And while he was being offered as this offering, he cried out to God to save him. And God sent an angel that killed the priest and delivered Abraham. So here he was delivered. Now here's Abraham moving forward. God says, offer to me your son. He's thinking, oh my gosh, I was that offering. You saved me. I need to make that right now. You're telling me it's time to make it right. Justice requires the offering to be completed. That's the dilemma. So here you have a broken-hearted old man feeling a responsibility to his covenant of justice, stepping forward. You have a young man, not necessarily young, depends on the tradition, but potentially a 30-year-old man that very easily could have resisted, was willing, for the sake of justice, to submit to the offering. Now, obviously, there's types and shadows, but I'm telling you this to show you that there's a progression of your responsibility, okay? Now, obviously, that was a test, but the test wasn't God telling him something contrary to what he had already received. Unfortunately, we like to take, fast forward, covenant. Abraham gets offered a covenant. He's saying covenant's going to come through you, but he's just promised. It's not clear what the details are yet. So Isaac, renewed. Jacob, Israel, it's renewed. It's going to be through you guys. They go into Egypt. They get delivered. God is working with his people. This is all in the process of covenant. At Mount Sinai, they receive the covenant land. That's when you receive further instruction, is when you're given the blessing. So, for my child, you can have TV time if you do this. So in order to have the land, you have to do these things. So, Noah, in order to have the earth, you have to do these 4 things. Or 7. Don't get hung up on that. It's worth it. It's worth a study. Now Moses, you guys want to be in Israel. You want to have this promised land. Well, here's 613 specific things to do. And one of them is the prohibition against shedding innocent blood. So now, if you rewind, and if Abraham was under the requirement to not shed innocent blood, he would have had a dilemma, because God would have been telling him to break a covenant that he is now under. He won't do that. So that's, I tell you all this to share with you, the metaphor and the allegory of the endowment is we have to test new messengers against the covenants that we're under and the light and knowledge we have. So why was this important for us as an LDS people? And why is it a crying shame that we have not dug into this lesson well enough? Okay, so my parents, they have a friend that they talk to me about at different times, but they were concerned that I was going to become this guy. Okay. What it is he received revelation that the neighbor's wife was supposed to be his wife, and he went and took this wife, and his neighbor's wife, and went out and became a polygamist and started a group. Okay, why does the temple guard me against that type of deception? Okay, he had received answers to his prayers. Other accounts, not this one, but they received angels telling them these things to take another man's wife. You don't do that. That's adultery. And we have received that light and that knowledge to not do that. So, it's really sad that these protections for us spiritually have been removed. I'm really sad about it. I'm sad that these lessons aren't there. Satan, he said that he had priesthood and power. I think that's really important to know that's true, because he is seeking to lead us astray. So, chicken or the egg, once again. Is this a leadership thing, or is this us as a people thing? 3 Nephi 16, I was thinking about reading it. I'm going to leave it to you. But it talks about the Gentiles, and we are the Gentiles. We are mixed blood Israel, technically Gentiles, that have the opportunity to one day be full Israel. We get associated with Ephraim. Why is God calling us Ephraim? Because he's telling us that we're not full-blood Israel until we're blessed, until we're sealed. When there was the crossing of the hands, and then Ephraim and Manasseh became full Israel at that point. Prior to that, their mom was Egyptian. They weren't Israel. They're mixed blood. That's us. I hope that one day we can be found worthy, and that we can be received as full inheritors of the covenant promised blessings given to Israel. I believe that's our opportunity. I believe that God gave us the temple metaphors as gold, that was seeking to bless us and lift us as a people. I'm afraid we looked at it too much as something to do, and instead of something to be learned from. It's understandable. Why is it understandable? Because that's the pattern of the past. Nothing new under the sun. I hope, though, that we can repent, that we can individually turn to the Lord, and that we can receive the forgiveness and be counted worthy individually. This is not a collective thing. Don't look to your leaders. Don't look to anybody. But, we need to rise above the ashes. Is it ashes? Oh, man. It's just sad. We're politically correct. It's not a good thing. God's trying to teach us. It's not about being offended that somebody's a woman. There was a body. Why was women's faces veiled? My body does not perceive the angels, the spirits, whatever. Like when messengers come, my body is clueless. She's veiled. Can't see it a little bit, but basically she's clueless. That's my experience. I don't see things. I can sense them sometimes, but I don't see nothing. That's my Eve being veiled. There's so much more, but 29 minutes, I think that's more than enough. Thanks for listening. If you made it through the whole thing, I hope this made sense. Feel free to ask questions. I think I need to dig into the covenant process in more detail. but I gave you a nutshell. I hope that made sense. Thanks for listening.